Good morning. We are beginning our unit over Lois Lowry's book called The Giver. And it is about a utopian and dystopian society. So let's have a discussion before reading chapter 1. So this is our before reading. And remember, we've done before our before, during, and after reading strategies. And we're going to use that with this book because I think it's particularly important to understand what a utopia is and in opposition what a dystopia is. Let's begin with Utopia. I'm going to use the highlighter to look at our phonemic pronunciation provided by the dictionary. Sometimes we don't know exactly what all these things mean. Let's break it down. Utopia is pronounced with the Y-O-O instead of the soft O. It's a hard O, so it's the U sound and not the So it's U, and then anytime you've got above one of your vowels the long dash, then that means you're going to pronounce it the long vowel sound, tope, E, and then the upside down E indicates that it's an so it's utope, So this isn't a word that we've looked at a lot, so I just wanted to make sure that you know how to pronounce it. Now, a utopia, let's look at the definition. It is an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. Like a society, the one that I've shown a picture of here has just some happy people on the beautiful hillside. The weather's obviously perfect, and they're just looking out into the gorgeous city where it's just a bright future. Sun is shining. And it looks like there's just places for everything. Over here, maybe that's where they hang out for fun. This is where everybody lives. These are their neat little cars. There's no traffic. There's nothing bad happening here, so it's a utopia. Now let's look at a word that has an opposite meaning. Dystopia. So again, before we jump into the word, let's look at the phonemic spelling here. This. Now sometimes the Y might throw people off, but it's not the long I sound. It's not dystopia. It's dis with a soft I, with a short I. My bad. The short I vowel sound. Dystopia. And so that has the same ending as utopia. You'll notice that by looking there, but then the prefix of this word gives it quite the opposite meaning. So it's an imagined place where everything is bad. Typically a dictator, a totalitarian, someone is in charge that does not have the greater good of the society in mind. And often in the stories, it's environmentally a degraded place. Just like this scene here that I've shown you as an example. This is London. You can see the London Eye over here. This is the River Thames. And I believe Westminster Abbey over here. Everything's just blown up and it's had some type of an apocalyptic situation that we would see in stories like Hunger Games. That might be one that you guys have heard of. It's a popular young adult series. So now we know what those two words mean. Let's compare them side by side. When you're talking about a utopian society, everything is generally orderly and an ideal situation. Now on the opposite spectrum over here, let's use a different color. We have things being in chaos. Often there's war happening within the society. Things are not perfect, people are struggling, but in our perfect world scenario, we don't have problems like hunger and disease. People are provided for, everything's good. In a dystopian society, the opposite is true. They generally lack basic necessities like food and water. Again, we could use the Hunger Games as an example because We know that they're called the Hunger Games because they had a lack of food for their society. It was a constant struggle. In a utopian society, there's usually war and violence are outlawed or supposedly non-existent. And in opposition in a dystopian society, the environment is often corrupt. A dictator is often in control, and usually in stories that are dystopian, there's a rebellion that's fighting against the dictator. Like in Star Wars, the rebellion was Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and Leia. They were fighting against the stormtroopers and the bad guys. So let's look over here. Usually it's a peaceful government. I would say sometimes in utopian societies there's usually a council, because that's seen as being more fair. Not just one person has the power. It's usually a council of people that are either elected or just, proven to be the right man for the job. In a utopian society, the roles that people play make them equal. As we'll see in our story, they talk about janitors being just as important as doctors because everybody has a role to play and they want everybody to feel like their role is important. And everyone has health care in a utopian society. They have education, shelter, food, employment, like we talked about earlier, a role to play. And in a dystopian society, we're often seeing that everyone is subject to conflict. Children are not exempt from poverty and hunger and often violence. So these are kind of our side-by-side comparisons of the utopian and dystopian societies that we see in fiction and science fiction and fantasy. All right, now let's look at a visual contrast. Let's look at these pictures. You guys will recognize this one on the left as being a photo of a still shot from the movie The Hunger Games. I want you to take a minute and just look at the characters that are presented. Okay, let's see if we can just recognize some things. There's some pretty obvious things here. Katniss's face is pretty tense. These gentlemen don't look happy, and they're detaining her sister, Primrose. Okay, these people over here on the side, I couldn't squeeze them all in, but the ones that you can see, they're not smiling. No one in this picture is smiling. Now let's look at this picture over here. He's smiling, she's smiling, we're riding bikes. I think you get the idea. So if you had to choose which one you felt like represented a utopian society, which would you select? That's right. I think that we would all agree that the utopia is clearly this picture on the right, which is a still shot from the movie The Giver, which we will be happy to check out once we've read our entire novel. I think you guys would agree we gotta wait till after. Okay, so let's move on to our next part of our vocabulary for chapter 1. Now we've had our before discussion. We've learned what utopian and utopia mean. They're representing of perfect worlds. And we've learned that dystopia means that it's representative of the opposite of a perfect world, a world with a lot of corruption. And that was our before activity. During your reading of chapter 1, I want you to use the following chart to identify words from the text that you're either unsure of or just do not know. And in the middle column, while you're reading, and you write that word down, you will go ahead and put a definition written in your word using your context clues. So these first 2 columns here are things that you will do during reading. These are our during activities in blue. You'll write down your word here, and in the middle column, you will make it a definition in your words. And you'll come up with your definition by using the context clues. Okay? So this is your during reading activity. I'm going to give you my example here. During chapter 1, I saw the word anxiously right on the bottom of the first page. And that can be a word that gives people trouble. Generally, most of you might know that one. And in my own words, I put that it meant not sure and scared. Because the sentence that I read said that they saw something, they were looking around anxiously, and the word frightened was also in that sentence. And so that led me to this definition. Now, let's look at our after reading activity. I'm going to use a different color to indicate so that it's clear. After we read, we're going to do what's in purple here. After. After you finish chapter 1, I would like you, after you finish reading chapter 1, to use the dictionary on Google, or if you prefer Webster online dictionary, use that to look up the actual definition from the dictionary and put it here. So let's look at the example that I gave you. Experiencing worry, unease, nervousness, usually over an uncertain event. I was pretty close. And that's one thing I really want you guys to use your during reading column, the middle column. I want you guys to realize how close you actually usually are. Sometimes we're a little off, sometimes we're way off, but I think it's important that we use this middle column to do, in our own words, use our context clues to create our own definitions. And then it's also important, after you read chapter 1, to look up the words that you were not sure about or really did not know at all, to go ahead and record their actual definition. And then we're going to share these with the class in our Google Classroom so that we can all benefit from them. And at the end of the week, we'll do a quick review of them and play a game. So if you guys will get started on your reading, and make sure you're writing down your words during reading from the blue section, and then after, we're going to do what's asked for on the end.